Mr. Richard Coleman was a man who appeared to have everything in this world: a booming business empire, a luxurious lifestyle, and respect from his peers. At 45 years old, he stood as one of the wealthiest men in the country, managing an empire so vast that his name was synonymous with success. Yet, behind his charming smile and tailored suits, Richard's life was hollow. He was often alone, surrounded by riches yet starved of genuine companionship. His personal life was an endless cycle of fleeting relationships, with no one to come home to after a long day at work. He would often ask himself, in the privacy of his thoughts, is this all there is to life? Richard was a complex man, a brilliant leader, but flawed in his personal dealings. He had three close friends: Michael, his longtime personal doctor, who often doubled as his confidant; Thomas, his loyal driver of over a decade; and Samuel, his co-worker and someone he trusted with difficult decisions at the company. The four had an unbreakable bond between them, frequently gathering at their favorite hotel in the heart of the city to enjoy lively banter and unwind from life's stresses. It was a Friday evening, and the four friends sat at their usual table in the grand dining hall of the hotel. The atmosphere was relaxed, filled with the murmur of conversations and the soft clinking of cutlery. Chandeliers overhead cast a warm glow, reflecting off the polished wooden tables and the sparkling crystal glasses. Richard sipped his wine, his eyes scanning the room lazily. Michael, ever observant, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "Richard, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room," Michael said, setting down his glass of whiskey. "What elephant?" Richard replied, raising an eyebrow. Thomas chuckled. "Come on, boss. You're 45 years old and you're still living like a bachelor. You switch women like you change cars." Richard grinned but said nothing. Samuel joined in, nudging Richard playfully. "We all know you're a master businessman, Richard, but what's the point of having all this money if you've got no one to share it with? Have you thought about settling down?" Richard rolled his eyes. "Oh, not this again. Why does everyone keep pushing this marriage agenda on me?" "Because," Thomas said, leaning forward, "you're not getting any younger. Look at yourself, boss. You've built an empire, and yet here you are, dining with us instead of sharing this table with a wife." "I don't need anyone," Richard replied, waving them off. "I'm perfectly fine on my own. Besides, how do you even know if someone really loves you? Most women just see me as a walking bank account." Michael sighed, his tone softening. "Maybe not all women are like that, Richard. You just have to look for the right one." Though Richard brushed off his friend's comments, their words lingered in his mind as he drove home that night. His penthouse apartment was as grand as they came, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The decor was sleek and modern, with plush furniture and abstract artwork adorning the walls. But as he stepped inside, the silence was deafening. He poured himself a drink from the well-stocked bar in the corner and stood by the window, staring out at the glittering city lights. "Maybe they're right," he thought, sipping his whiskey. "Maybe it's time I find someone." The next few weeks passed uneventfully, but the idea of settling down began to take root in Richard's mind. He decided to make an effort, attending a few social events and mingling more than usual. That's when he met Olivia. Olivia was nothing like the women Richard usually dated. She was graceful, intelligent, and had a warmth that drew people to her. They met at a charity gala, where Olivia was volunteering to help raise funds for underprivileged children. The grand ballroom was adorned with elegant decorations, and the hum of conversation filled the air as attendees mingled, sipping champagne. "Good evening," Richard said, approaching her with his signature charm. Olivia looked up and smiled politely. "Good evening. I'm Richard Coleman." He introduced himself, extending a hand. "I know," Olivia said, shaking his hand. "You're hard to miss at an event like this. I'm Olivia. Just Olivia," he asked playfully, raising an eyebrow. Olivia laughed softly. Olivia laughed softly. "Olivia Bennett, but no fancy titles like you." Richard chuckled, impressed by her confidence. "What brings you here tonight, Olivia?" "I volunteer with the organization," she explained. "We're raising funds for a project to build schools in rural areas." Richard was intrigued. He spent the rest of the evening talking to her, genuinely interested in her passion for helping others. By the end of the night, he felt a connection he hadn't felt in years. Richard didn't waste any time. Over the next few weeks, he courted Olivia with a determination that surprised even himself. He took her out to elegant dinners, introduced her to his friends, and even attended some of her volunteering events, a stark departure from his usual routine. Thomas was the first to notice the change. "Boss, you're smiling a lot these days," he teased one morning as he drove Richard to work. "Am I?" Richard replied, glancing at Thomas through the rearview mirror. "Yes, and I think I know why." "It's Olivia, isn't it?" Richard didn't respond, but the faint smile on his face said it all. After several months of dating, Richard decided to take the plunge. He proposed to Olivia in a private moment at his penthouse, with the city lights twinkling behind them. He knelt down on one knee, the soft glow of the chandelier casting a warm light over them, and presented her with a diamond ring. "Olivia Bennett," he said, his voice steady, "will you marry me?" Olivia was taken aback, tears welling up in her eyes. "Richard, this is so unexpected. I know we haven't been together for long." Richard had never met anyone like you. "You've brought something into my life that I didn't even know I was missing. Will you do me the honor of being my wife?" Olivia smiled, nodding through her tears. "Yes, Richard, I'll marry you." The wedding was a grand affair, held in a stunning ballroom adorned with cascading floral arrangements and glittering chandeliers. The event was attended by the city's elite, as well as Olivia's close friends and family. The scent of fresh roses filled the air as a string quartet played soft melodies, creating an atmosphere of elegance and romance. Olivia's radiant smile lit up the room as she walked down the aisle, her white gown shimmering under the soft glow of the chandeliers. But as the days turned into weeks, Richard's old fears began to resurface. He couldn't shake the thought that Olivia might have married him for his wealth. Late one night, as Olivia slept beside him in their luxurious master bedroom with its silk-draped canopy bed, Richard stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. What if she's just putting on an act? What if she's only here because of the lifestyle I can provide? These doubts gnawed at him, growing stronger with each passing day. Richard decided he needed to find out the truth, no matter what it took. Richard's doubts about Olivia's love for him grew each day, casting a shadow over their once peaceful life. Her care, affection, and dedication toward him didn't seem enough to silence the voice in his head. Does she truly love me, or just my money? His late-night musings soon turned into a plan. One evening, after another long day at work, Richard called his three closest friends, Michael, Thomas, and Samuel, to meet him at their usual spot, a quiet booth in the luxurious hotel lounge where they often gathered. The lounge's ambient lighting and plush leather seats were familiar to them, a sanctuary from the chaos of their demanding lives. When they arrived, Richard appeared uncharacteristically tense. Thomas poured him a glass of whiskey, sliding it across the table. "Boss, what's eating you today? You don't look yourself." Richard leaned back, swirling the whiskey in his glass. He hesitated before speaking. "I need your help," he finally said, his tone serious, "and I need you to promise me you won't ask too many questions or try to stop me." The group exchanged curious glances. Samuel, ever the skeptic, leaned forward. "What's this about, Richard? You're making it sound like some top secret mission. It's about Olivia," Richard said bluntly. Michael raised an eyebrow. "What about Olivia? Is everything okay between you two?" Richard sighed. I don't know, Michael. I've been having these doubts, these nagging thoughts. What if she doesn't actually love me for who I am? What if she's only here because of the lifestyle I give her?" Samuel frowned. "Richard, she seems genuine. Why are you doing this to yourself?" "That's the thing. I don't know. I can't just take her word for it. I need proof," Richard said, leaning forward, his voice almost a whisper. "And that's why I've called you all here. I've come up with a way to test her." Thomas's face tightened. "Test her? What exactly do you mean by that?" Richard straightened up in his chair, laying out his idea. "Medical records. Something convincing. You call Olivia and tell her that I've been in a terrible car accident and that my injuries are life-altering. Tell her I'll never walk again," he explained. Michael's eyes widened. "You can't be serious. Do you understand how cruel this is, Richard? Olivia has been nothing but kind to you." "I need to know," Richard insisted. "If she truly loves me, she won't care about my condition. She'll stay by my side no matter what." "And what about me?" Thomas asked, crossing his arms. "You'll play along," Richard replied. "You're going to be the one driving me home from the hospital and helping sell the story. She can't suspect anything." Samuel shook his head in disbelief. "Richard, this is insane. You're risking your marriage just to satisfy your insecurities." "Samuel," Richard said firmly, "I need to do this. If Olivia's love is real, then this won't change anything. But if it isn't, I deserve to know the truth." After a long silence, Michael reluctantly agreed. "Fine, I'll do it. But you owe her an explanation when this is over." The next morning, Michael made the call. Olivia picked up on the first ring, her cheerful voice turning to panic as Michael delivered the fabricated news. "Mrs. Olivia, this is Dr. Michael. I'm afraid I have some terrible news. Richard was involved in a serious car accident. He's in critical condition at the hospital. You need to come right away." Olivia gasped, her heart racing. "What? Oh my God! What happened? Is he going to be okay?" Michael hesitated, playing his role. "We're doing everything we can, but it doesn't look good." Olivia wasted no time. She rushed to the hospital, tears streaming down her face. The hospital's sterile hallways felt endless as she hurried to the room Michael had directed her to. As she arrived, She found Richard lying in a hospital bed, his face pale and his legs covered in heavy bandages. The soft hum of medical monitors filled the room, adding to the tension. "Richard!" she cried, rushing to his side. Richard looked up at her with faint weakness, his voice barely a whisper. "Olivia, I'm sorry." Tears filled her eyes as she grasped his hand. "Why are you apologizing? None of this is your fault. What matters is that you're alive. I'm here, Richard, and I'll take care of you." Michael entered the room, his expression solemn. "Mrs. Olivia, I'm afraid I have to prepare you for the worst. Due to the severity of his injuries, Richard will never walk again. We've done all we can." Olivia's breath hitched, but she didn't hesitate. "Then we'll adapt. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he's comfortable and happy." Michael's stomach churned with guilt as she turned to Richard, her expression filled with determination. "You're my husband, Richard. I'll never abandon you." The next day, Michael discharged Richard, handing him off to Thomas. Olivia pushed Richard's wheelchair to the car and carefully helped him in. She smiled at him, despite her tear-streaked face. "Don't worry, love," she said softly. "We'll get through this together." Back at home, Olivia became a picture of devotion. She cooked Richard's favorite meals, washed his clothes, and rearranged their home to make it easier for him to move around in his wheelchair. Every time Richard watched her, he felt a pang of guilt. She was everything he could have asked for and more. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Olivia turned to him. "Richard," she began, "do you remember our wedding vows? I promised to love you in sickness and in health. That promise wasn't just for the good times. It's for times like this too." Richard's throat tightened. He nodded but said nothing, his guilt building as the days turned into weeks. 2 months later, Richard sat with his friends at their usual hotel. His voice was heavy as he spoke. "She's passed every test I've thrown at her," he admitted. "She takes care of me like nothing's changed. I think maybe I've been wrong about her all along." Samuel leaned back in his chair, a satisfied look on his face. "Told you, Richard, not every woman is out for your money." Thomas nodded in agreement. "She loves you, boss. That's clear as day." But Michael wasn't so quick to celebrate. "If you think this test was enough, Richard, you need to tell her the truth. She deserves to know." Richard sighed, knowing Michael was right. But just as he was starting to accept Olivia's love, Samuel had another suggestion. "A second test," Samuel said. "What if we take this a step further?" Samuel asked, a mischievous glint in his eye. Richard looked at him curiously. "What do you have in mind?" Samuel leaned forward, his voice low. "We'll see if she's truly faithful. Let's hire someone to test her loyalty. Someone she doesn't know. If she rejects him, then you'll know for sure." Though part of Richard felt it was unnecessary, the insecurities buried deep in his heart whispered otherwise. "All right," he said finally. And so, the wheels for the next test were set in motion. Richard had begun to feel a sense of comfort with Olivia's devotion after the accident. Yet Samuel's suggestion to put Olivia through another test reignited the embers of doubt in his heart. If Olivia's love was genuine, he reasoned, this test would prove her loyalty beyond any doubt. The plan was simple yet calculated. Samuel proposed hiring a man known for his irresistible charm, a professional womanizer named Martin. Martin had a reputation for making women fall for him in mere days, no matter how loyal or committed they were. If Olivia stayed faithful, Richard promised himself he would trust her completely and put his insecurities to rest. "Are you sure this is necessary, Samuel?" Richard asked one evening as they sat in their usual corner of the lounge. Samuel leaned back, crossing his arms. "Absolutely. Look, you said you wanted to know for sure, didn't you? Martin's the guy for the job. If Olivia doesn't fall for his tricks, then there's nothing left for you to doubt." Thomas frowned, hesitant. "This feels wrong. Olivia has proven herself. Why do you have to keep testing her, Richard?" Richard didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his glass of whiskey, then muttered, "Because I have to know if she's the one. I need to be sure." Samuel pulled out his phone. "I'll set it up. Martin will accidentally bump into her at one of the places she volunteers. From there, we'll see how she reacts." It was a breezy afternoon when Olivia first encountered Martin. She was sorting through boxes of donated clothes at the community center when a tall, striking man with an easy smile strolled up to her. "Excuse me, miss," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "Do you work here?" Olivia looked up, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "I volunteer here, yes. How can I help you?" Martin flashed a disarming grin. "I'm donating some items, but honestly, I'm impressed by what you're doing here. It's not every day you see someone giving so much of their time and energy for others." Olivia smiled politely. It's no big deal, really. Just trying to help where I can." For the next few minutes, Martin lingered, asking her questions about her work and casually weaving in personal comments. "You must have a good heart," he remarked, leaning slightly closer. "Not many people would dedicate themselves like this." Olivia thanked him, but kept the conversation professional. Over the next few days, Martin showed up at the community center more often. At first, it was under the guise of donating or asking about volunteer opportunities, but as time went on, his intentions became clearer. One afternoon, he found Olivia on her lunch break, sitting on a bench outside. He approached her with 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you could use a break," he said, handing her one of the cups. Olivia hesitated before accepting it. "That's very kind of you. Thank you." As they talked, he began subtly steering the conversation toward more personal topics. "So, Olivia, do you do this full time, or do you have a family to take care of?" Olivia smiled and held up her hand, showing her wedding ring. "I'm married, actually. My husband's name is Richard." Martin's smile didn't falter. "Lucky guy," he said smoothly. "Still, I bet you don't get much time for yourself. You're always taking care of others, aren't you?" Olivia laughed lightly. "I'm happy with my life. My husband supports me in everything I do, and that's all I need." Undeterred, Martin continued to lay his charm on thick over the coming week. From compliments to offering to help her with her work, he did everything he could to win her over. But Olivia never wavered. Each time he pushed the boundaries, she shut him down gently but firmly. "Martin," she said one evening after he had made another subtle attempt to ask her out, "I appreciate your kindness, but I'm happily married. Please respect that." By the end of the week, Martin knew his task was a failure, not because he lacked skill, but because Olivia was unwavering in her love for Richard. He met with Richard at their usual lounge, delivering his report. "You've got a good one, Richard," Martin said, shaking his head. She wouldn't budge. I tried everything: compliments, sympathy, even playing the "I need emotional support" card, but she wouldn't give me the time of day. Richard sat in stunned silence. His heart felt both heavy with guilt and light with relief. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Positive. That woman loves you. If she didn't, trust me, I'd have known by now," Martin said confidently. Samuel clapped Richard on the back, grinning. "See, I told you she's the real deal. You don't need to doubt her anymore." Thomas, who had been silent for most of the meeting, finally spoke. "Now, the only question is, how are you going to make it up to her, Richard?" The next morning, Richard woke before Olivia. He went to the kitchen and made a tray of her favorite breakfast: fresh tea, buttery croissants, and fruit. It wasn't something he'd ever done before, but he knew he needed to show her how much she meant to him. Carrying the tray to the bedroom, he gently set it down on the nightstand and touched Olivia's shoulder. "Good morning, love," he said softly. Olivia stirred, opening her eyes slowly. "Richard, what's all this?" Richard sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. Olivia frowned in confusion. "For what?" Richard took a deep breath. "Olivia, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." He explained everything: his doubts, the fake accident, and even the man he had hired to test her. As he spoke, Olivia listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When he finished, Richard looked at her nervously. "I was wrong to doubt you," he said earnestly. "You've been nothing but loyal and loving, and I didn't trust that. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me?" Olivia was silent for a moment, then let out a small laugh. "You really went through all that trouble just to see if I love you?" Richard looked away, ashamed. "Yes." Olivia reached out and cupped his face, turning his head to look at her. "Richard, I married you because I love you, not your money, not your status. You didn't have to go to such lengths to find that out." Tears pricked Richard's eyes as he nodded. "I know that now, and I promise I'll never doubt you again." Olivia smiled, wiping away a tear from his cheek. "Good. Now, let's eat this breakfast before it gets cold." From that day forward, Richard and Olivia's relationship grew stronger. Richard learned to trust Olivia fully, and his friends marveled at the transformation. "Turns out, love really does conquer all, huh?" Samuel joked at their next gathering. Thomas smiled. About time the boss saw the light. Richard laughed, raising his glass. "Here's to Olivia, the woman who proved me wrong and showed me what love really is." They all toasted, and for the first time in years, Richard felt a peace he hadn't known before, a peace rooted in trust, love, and the certainty that he had found someone who truly cared for him. The story of Richard Coleman serves as a powerful lesson about trust, love, and the importance of valuing genuine relationships over material wealth. Despite his immense success and wealth, Richard's insecurities and inability to trust nearly jeopardized the most meaningful relationship in his life. His journey teaches us that true love is built on faith, communication, and mutual respect, not constant testing or manipulation. Doubts and fears are natural in any relationship, but addressing them through honest conversations rather than deceptive tactics is the key to building a lasting bond. Olivia's unwavering devotion and grace in the face of Richard's doubts highlight the beauty of unconditional love and the importance of staying true to one's values. Ultimately, Richard's realization that love is a gift, not a transaction, is a reminder to cherish and nurture the connections that bring true happiness and fulfillment. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to explore more inspiring and thought-provoking stories on this channel. See you in the next video. Once upon a time, in a small village called Aim, there lived two brothers called Andrew and Peter. Andrew was very handsome and blessed with a beautiful singing voice as well, while Peter wasn't as handsome as his brother Andrew. The reason was because when Peter was a child, she was involved in a domestic accident where oil splashed on his face, leaving him with a nasty scar on his face, which wasn't pleasant to look at. Everyone loved and admired Andrew, but Peter, who was the younger brother, was usually ignored. They were brothers, but as time went on, Andrew became very proud and arrogant because of the constant praises from women in the village. She stopped going out with his brother and was ashamed to be seen anywhere with Peter. However, Peter knew the reason why Andrew kept his distance, and it hurt him so much. But eventually, she learned how to enjoy his own company. His parents didn't make things easier because whenever a guest or visitor came to their house, they would always tell Peter to go inside and stay hidden until their guests left. Almost every night, Peter would cry his eyes out and beg God to take his life. She was ashamed to look at the mirror because of how she looked. Peter lived as a servant at home because his parents would prefer to send him on errands rather than send his elder brother, Andrew. One day, Peter went to fetch some water at the village stream. On his way back home, she saw an old man on the path that led to his house. The old man looked very tired as she sat down by the roadside with a big pot of water by his side. The sun was scorching that day, and the old man looked like he hadn't eaten or rested for hours. Peter greeted the man and walked past him, but she felt sorry for the old man, so she turned around. Peter kept his own pot of water safely hidden beside a big tree and offered to help the man carry his water. The man thanked Peter for his generosity and kindness and stood up to lead Peter to where she lived. She was very old and couldn't walk without a stick, and this made Peter wonder how the old man carried the big pot of water all by himself to where she had previously met him. But Peter didn't say anything. She followed the old man patiently with the pot of water on his head. They walked and walked until they got to an isolated hut in the forest. The hut was surrounded by towering trees, and it looked like no one had lived there for years. When they arrived at the hut, Peter kept the pot of water for the old man. But as soon as she was about to leave, the old man said to him, "You have a very good heart. Many people saw me stranded by the roadside, but none of them came to my aid. Because of your kindness, I will grant your deepest heart's desire." The old man gave Peter a special cream wrapped in a rare leaf. "Take this cream. It is a magical cream made from a blend of many special herbs. Apply it on your face when you want to go out, and you will look handsome as the morning sun. Any woman you kiss on the lips with this cream on your face will forever see you as a star." Peter collected the magical cream and thanked the man. When she got home, she hid it in the roof of his room. But she was scared of using it because she didn't know the old man. A lot of women were attracted to Andrew. They would buy him all sorts of gifts and jewelry just to impress him and win his heart. but Andrew refused to settle down with any of them. She enjoyed being chased and wanted to continue enjoying the benefits of being chased. One day, a very beautiful and wealthy woman came for Andrew's hand in marriage. She had brought with her a lot of gifts and provisions. As they sat in the compound discussing the marriage plans, Peter showed up. She had been sent to the market to get some things and had no idea there would be visitors in the compound. Immediately Andrew saw him. She screamed at Peter in anger. "You ugly thing! Why do you want to spoil this beautiful day of mine with your ugly face?" Everyone looked at Peter and started laughing. She couldn't bear the shame, so she ran into his room and started crying bitterly. While she was crying, she looked up and remembered the magical cream which the old man had given him weeks ago. Without thinking twice, she took the cream and rubbed a bit of it on his face. Immediately after applying the cream, she felt a strange aura of confidence, but she was still deeply hurt, so she fell asleep. The next day, Peter woke up and went into the forest to fetch some firewood as usual. On his way to the forest, she found it very strange that all the women she passed were looking at him. It made him very uncomfortable, and she felt something must be wrong with his face. Before, people didn't look at him twice, but now everyone was so focused on him. She wanted to run back home, but she knew what to run back home, but she knew what to expect if she didn't return home with some firewood. So she continued his journey into the forest. After fetching the firewood, she tried to lift it onto his head when a very beautiful woman showed up out of nowhere. Her name was Ada. "Let me help you," she said. Peter was shocked because this would be the first time anyone would talk to him or offer assistance to him. "Are you talking to me?" Peter asked, surprised. "Of course. Why would an angel like you be carrying such a heavy load all by yourself?" Peter was stunned. "An angel? Me? Or should I call you a god instead? Your beauty is unlike anything I've ever seen before," Ada added. Peter couldn't believe his ears. It was the first time anyone had ever told him she was handsome. She watched as Ada carried the firewood on her shoulder, and she led the way to his house. The birds chirped sweetly in the background as they walked together, and for the first time in years, Peter felt a sense of joy he could not explain. While they walked, Andrew told Peter that he liked her and wanted to know her better. Peter felt like she was dreaming. Even the worst women in the village had always avoided her. Yet here was Andrew asking to be her lover. The moonlight illuminated their path as they walked, casting long shadows on the ground. When they arrived at her compound, Ada was seated outside the house, fanning herself with a large woven palm fan. She watched closely as Andrew kept the firewood beside the fire. Before Andrew left, he hugged Peter and kissed her on the forehead. When Ada saw this, she became very jealous. Despite the fact that she had all the women in the village running after her, she felt envious that Andrew, just one man, was interested in her sister. Ada went to Peter and started asking her where and how she knew Andrew, but Peter ignored her. This made Ada even angrier. When Peter entered her room, she remembered the cream the old man gave her. She realized that the cream must be the reason why all the women were suddenly attracted to her. The next day, Peter rubbed the cream again before she went to the stream to fetch water. She found Andrew waiting for her. "I knew you'd come here, so I waited for you. Let me help you with the water," he said, his voice warm and gentle. As time went on, Peter grew fonder of Andrew. He was a very kind and caring man, but Peter was scared. She wasn't sure if Andrew loved her because of the supernatural beauty the magical cream gave her, or because of her true self. Meanwhile, Ada was consumed by hatred and jealousy. She couldn't bear to see Andrew always around Peter, despite having many women running after her. Ada vowed to snatch Andrew away from Peter. The next time Andrew accompanied Peter home from the market, Ada moved closer to him and started trying to seduce him. However, Andrew was not enticed at all. He was unmoved by her actions. "Leave that ugly girl and take me. I promise I'll make you happy. What would it take to win your heart? Tell me, and I'll do it," Ada said, her voice trembling with desperation. But Andrew insisted that Peter was the woman he wanted. Whenever Ada looked at her sister, the nasty scars were still visible. But whenever any woman looked at her, they saw a very handsome man, even more attractive than Ada. Driven by frustration, Ada decided to monitor Peter. She was convinced that Peter was up to something. That was the only explanation for why all the women who had disliked her before suddenly wanted her. One morning, Ada woke up very early and stayed at Peter's window, peeping through to see what Peter would do. She watched as Peter unsuspectingly took the cream from where she had hidden it and rubbed it on her face. Then Ada observed where Peter hid the cream. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the compound as birds chirped melodiously in the background. When Peter left for the forest to fetch firewood, Ada sneaked into her room and took the cream. She believed the cream must be the reason why all the women in the village suddenly loved Peter. Ada rubbed some of the cream on her face. But immediately after applying it, she started feeling a burning sensation. Her face grew hotter and hotter with each passing minute. The pain became unbearable, and Ada quickly ran to wash her face. When her parents saw her, they were shocked. The cream had completely destroyed her face, leaving it worse than Peter's. It was red, discolored, and badly burned. When Peter returned from the market with Andrew, as usual, she couldn't believe her eyes when she saw her elder sister. Ada's face was so red, discolored, and burnt. Immediately, Ada saw Peter. She started pleading for forgiveness. "Please forgive me. I'm deeply sorry for what I did to you. Please forgive me," Ada begged, tears streaming down her cheeks. Peter was confused. She had never seen Ada apologize before. "What did you do? I've always made peace with the way you treated me, and I still love you. Even though you treated me harshly, I still love you," Peter said, her voice filled with sincerity. Ada started weeping seriously. She held Peter's hands and confessed her sins. Ada told Peter and their parents that when they were little, their parents had loved and cherished her so much. They gave her everything she wanted because she was their only child. But when Peter was born, it was as if all the love and attention shifted to Peter. Everyone focused on Peter because she was more handsome as a child. This made Ada very jealous. Out of envy, Ada had placed a pan of hot oil on top of the cupboard and told Peter to go and bring it, knowing full well that Peter was little and that the hot oil would pour on her. Ada confessed that she did it on purpose so that she would be the only attractive child and everyone would stop treating Peter specially. Everyone was shocked by Ada's confession. Her parents were deeply disappointed in her. But Peter, with her kind heart, told Ada that she had forgiven her a long time ago because it was in the past. All the women in the village avoided Ada because of how burnt her face was. And after hearing what she did to her own sister, they disliked